Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Sharielle if you're new, and if you're returning, thank you for coming back. So today is day 9 of my 21-day sewing challenge. I started this challenge because I've had a bad habit of starting things and not finishing my designs, and also I've lost motivation to sew lately. So I'm doing this to get me back in the game with sewing and getting things done. In today's video, I will be showing you how to make a do-rag from scratch. So let's get right into the video. The first thing you will need is a seam ripper, and the second thing you will need is a do-rag, because we're going to take the do-rag apart and use it as a template to make the new do-rag. This is the middle seam of the do-rag, and with the seam ripper, you're going to take this apart. If you're a beginner, take the pointy part of the seam ripper and put it underneath one stitch. Then you're going to push through so that the stitch is broken. And repeat this until you've taken apart the entire do-rag. After you've taken the do-rag apart, this is what it should look like, and you should have two pieces that look like this. The do-rag I'm making today is made from a stretch velvet, which is a little bit heavier than a standard do-rag. You don't have to use that, but when you do buy do-rag fabric, you need to make sure that the fabric has a two-way stretch, which means when you stretch your fabric, it stretches vertically, and when you stretch it the other direction, it stretches horizontally, similar to a t-shirt. The second thing you need to look out for when buying do-rag fabric is to make sure it's 95% polyester and 5% spandex or something similar to that ratio. And the third thing is to make sure that at least one side of the fabric is smooth, because you need a smooth side for your hair. With one piece of the do-rag you took apart, you will use it as a template. For one, you need to make sure the fabric is folded over so that when you cut it out, there will be two pieces. Secondly, I have my do-rag to where the stretchiest part of the fabric is across the do-rag. So when you put it on your head, it'll stretch to fit. Now I have the template pinned to the fabric layers so it won't move when I cut it out. So this is what the do-rag pieces look like, fully cut out. There are two types of do-rags. The first one is that the seam is on the inside, and the second is the seam is on the outside of the do-rag. Because the stretch velvet is thick, I'm doing an outside seam so it will lay flat on your head when you wear it. So on the inside of the do-rag, you see that there's no seam, it's just a line, and that's because when you sew it, you sew the wrong sides of the fabric together. This do-rag has an inside seam, which means the right sides of the fabric and or the outside of the fabric pieces were sewn together. This has an inside seam because the fabric is thinner, like most standard do-rags. So when the person puts this on their head, the inside seam will lay flat. So now we're at the fun part, sewing the do-rag. What I've done here is put the wrong sides of the fabric together, and I'm going to pin them so when I sew it, it doesn't move and I know it's lined up correctly. And of course, if you're sewing an inside seam durag, you're going to put the outside pieces together, the opposite of what I'm doing on the screen right now. Since you can't see what I'm doing, this is how the pins look to keep the durag pieces together. If you don't have pins, you can find them at a Joann Fabrics or Walmart. Because this is an outside seam durag, I'm going to sew it a 1/2 inch past the edge. Make sure you backstitch. Once I get to the end of the durag, I'm going to stop a 1/2 inch before the edge. Make sure you backstitch again. The front and the back of your middle seam should have this little opening just like this. Next, I'm serging the edges of the durag pieces separately. Do not serge the edges of the pieces together. For a better look and understanding, you only serge the outside edges and you also serge the inside edges. Do not serge the middle seam yet. If you want to sew an inside seam durag, I have a video for that in the description below. Now that you've serged all the edges, you're going to backstitch that 1/2 inch that you skipped in the beginning and in the end of the middle durag seam. If you don't have a serger, you can do the serging steps with a zigzag stitch. But if you do have a serger, to finish this off, you're going to serge the middle seam. And once you serge the middle seam, you can tie a knot on both ends before you snip it, or you can use that trail of thread and backstitch it in the corners and cut it off. And I did the third option. When I serge it, I take that chain of thread and I put it back underneath and I serge on top of it, so when I cut it, it's sealed off. This last step is personal because I have a clothing brand and I am top stitching my riser code tag on the durag so they know it's official. This is the finished product with my top stitched embroidered tag with the outside seam, and I love how this durag came out. This is the durag on a model, and you can buy this at riserco.com. If you got this far in my video, thank you so much. If you want to see more from me, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell notification button if you want to see right when I post, and share this with your friends. Thank you once again. You are appreciated.